Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. Today I'm joined by Neil Kelly, CEO and founder of Vector, who are experts in talent solutions for the biopharma industry through recruitment and training. Neil's someone with loads of experience in devising talent strategies, particularly in contract manufacturing, having spent a lot of time in-house at Patheon. Neil, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Luke. Great to be here. I think this is my second time.
It's your second appearance, yeah.
Thank you for having me back.
Of course. Neil, it's been a busy year for you. I saw you just recently got back from Bio and we're posting some really interesting things on LinkedIn. I wonder if, before we jump into it, I wonder if you could share your reflections of what you're seeing across the industry at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah. The Bio conference was fantastic. It was a huge event this year. There's a real confidence, in my opinion, that is coming back to the market right now. When I interviewed and met with a number of innovators, big pharma and academia, you could really get the sense that they want to do deals. They want to try and push business forward in the biopharma space. So there's a real level of optimism. I think that reflected in terms of some of the investments, inside the event and outside the event as well. So I think that was great. I think, as I shared to you offline as well, probably one of the big takeaways for me is making sure that we get the molecules to market faster. So whether that's using AI, quantum computing was mentioned to me when I met a number of organizations, but get the molecules to market faster. Why? Because that then reduced the cost of production across all of the supply chain, of course. It makes perfect sense, right? And it's what we know already. But I think that was really the one thing that resonated with probably circa 30 conversation I had over the 3 days. So yeah, great event. Certainly be going back next year. And I think for you as well as obviously a partner to us, I think we've from a CDMO perspective, we play part of that supply chain. CDMO plays a really critical role now as part of that supply chain. So really excited about what we can do into CDMO moving forward.
You also hosted a roundtable discussion at CDMO Live. And as part of that, we polled the attendees about what they felt was holding them back from achieving growth. And I think something that's really interesting was that the two polls we ran, both of them, the thing that came up number one was leadership. Why do you think leadership is seen as such a critical issue when it comes to achieving growth?
I think the first thing is, the definition of leadership sometimes, because it can be kind of a catch-all for a number of different things. But let me try and break it down for you, I think, in, kind of the context of our conversations.
Yeah, how would you define?
It's an obvious one for people to pull out, right? We need strong leadership, right? So how many times have you heard that throughout your career? But it's true, right? I mean, if you're looking to build your strategic plan, if you're looking to build your people plan, it all comes from having the right leadership in place at the right moment and the right level of the organization, right? So even if you're an SME, and you're looking to grow a business, then you need the right leader in place. If you're going from 3 to 4 to 5, 6 people, it doesn't really matter. But the one thing I would say, which, and we spoke about this on our last, if you remember rightly, on our last time we spoke, it's making sure you're building towards the right environment and the right culture you're trying to create as well. And rightly or wrongly, if you hire the wrong leaders in the organization who are driving the wrong behaviors, and maybe, by the way, developing the wrong strategic plan to get you there to your objectives, then the chance of failure then suddenly increase dramatically. So having the right, leaders in place at the right moment, because don't forget, as you grow, there's probably different iterations of that growth. Yeah. And I think that's how I would define it as part of the growth journey. That they're the key things I've seen throughout my career.
Do you think then that CDMOs can sometimes suffer from poor leadership? And why is that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it, right? I've seen it in our, in the organizations I've been in, both in CDMO and outside of CDMO. And ultimately, you're working in very, very tough environments, often very chaotic. And not all leaders can survive in that type of environment. if you're constantly working within the gray, which by the way, I love, you know, it's not for everyone. It isn't.
Mhm.
And you've got to thrive within those environments of working within the gray. And that's why when you define leadership, you need to be really careful of what the context is and what you're trying to achieve through those leaders as well. Because a leader, can be very different things to different people, of course. So yeah, so I think the challenge is within CDMO, you're constantly working within the grey, and the more developed, more mature CDMOs are moving towards more of a systematic approach to leadership.
Do you think there has to be a certain level of comfort with uncertainty then, given how quickly the market's changing and how the different you've got
Yeah.
to be ahead of like you've got to be at least 3 to 5 years ahead of what the current market needs. Does it take a certain type of person to do that?
It does. I mean, so I once had a conversation with a CEO or a kind of a president of one of our businesses who was fantastic. And one of the things that he always said to me was that he could see the pathway forward through the sometimes chaos, right? The chaos being rapid growth, you're not always going to have 100% of the answers to the questions you're asking, but you could see the pathway forward. It resonates with me because whenever something gets complex, organizationally gets really complex, I love that. I love seeing the pathway through and how we're going to get there.
Mm.
So I think that for me is, it's having that ability to look through what's not important along that journey in terms of, making sure we hit, patient, the products we're producing is safe for the patients. Go back to those fundamental pieces as a leader, go back to your values, and you won't go far wrong.
What sort of impact would you say there is on the organization's health if there is poor leadership? What impact does that make?
I think it plays into what I've just touched on, really. So if we talk about, those leaders who are good in crisis, we've all seen them throughout our careers, and those people can really step up to a kind of a crisis-based organization where there's always a crisis somewhere. The house is always on fire.
Mm.
And unfortunately, you can't run a business that way. As a strategic leader who has the ability to both put the long-term vision in place, but the short-term goals and objectives that get you there. So, what are those steps to success? There's a real skill to do that, whereby you can still do the long-range planning, but the short-term delivery is always still there. So I think, the leaders you don't want those leaders constantly in your business who are only ever good in a crisis,
Mm.
because employees need stability. They need to have that psychological safety. And I was thinking, I don't know why I was thinking about it, but this morning, but, kind of psychological safety is extremely important, to ensure they have a safe environment to operate, which promotes, the diverse and inclusive environment we're trying to strive for, which I'm sure we'll come back to D&I in a moment.
Any role, any company which is trying to experiment and push boundaries, they need to have the safety to be able to make mistakes.
That's it.
When you're interviewing candidates for a leadership position,
Mm-hmm.
are there any questions which you can ask, which sort of like immediately weeds out or tries to find if they have the right kind of qualities that you're looking for?
Selecting of talent can change from business to business, of course, but I think there's some fundamental, best practices. I think one of them is very, very simple. It's unbelievably simple, in fact, which is transparency.
Hmm.
And in order to be transparent and give if you probably rewind the clock 10, 15 years ago, we used to do assessments on individuals for realistic job previews, right? This
Mhm.
kind of, and we still have it to a degree. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to give the leader or the employee a realistic overview of what life is like within that business.
Hmm.
And I often say, look, this is a demanding environment you're going to step into. This is really going to be challenging. It's going to be a hell of a lot of grey that you're going to be facing, and therefore, if that's not for you, if a building journey is not for you, then don't move forward.
Hmm.
Don't move forward in this process. And it's simple, but what you often find is people are competitive generally. Um, they want to show up well because that's what they've always done throughout their career. So you're doing a little bit of pressure testing at this stage
Hmm.
to understand whether they're really up for this type of environment or culture. So yeah, I often and I encourage my team as well to use transparency because there's no gray. It's very easy for us to navigate through these processes if we're sticking to the facts and sticking to transparency. That's it's a really strong process that you're then creating for the customer.
If someone is moving from maybe, let's say, a more stable big
Mm.
pharma type of environment into a more fast-moving, uncertain CDMO kind of environment, how do you make sure they're match fit for that kind of change?
It's an interesting one because, of course, I've had this all throughout my career,
Mm,
especially the last kind of 10 years or so. And what I find that some very, very good people within big pharma, very good. But culturally, CDMO is not the environment they want to or should be operating within. But equally, there's many people who should be operating within that environment. So I'll give you an example. So scientists is probably an easy one for me
mm,
because if you're with a big pharma company and you're working on one molecule, you probably only work on one molecule for a 3-year period, for example. Within a CDMO environment, you're probably working on 5 molecules, over
mhm,
that 3-year period. So the growth and the ability to learn faster is so much more heightened within a CDMO environment, and that takes a certain special person type of individual to thrive in that environment.
mm,
One of the things I always look for is learning agility. So how fast can you learn? What's your ability to absorb information? I also look for aspects around have they what kind of projects have they been involved in, within a big pharma environment as well? Because what you tend to see is there's a behavior which you're looking for within big pharma, which shows that they've got the ability to continue to learn and if they spin into different projects or involved in different businesses. The final piece, which is really critical but often overlooked, is that cultural diversity element that they've
mhm.
um, that, that they've got. And one of the things that you learn fast within an international environment as well. So those people who have said, you know what, I've joined this business. I'm looking for an overseas assignment. This is not a big expat deal we're talking about here, but I'm looking for something a bit different. Go off to Asia or go off to the US, spend 12 months learning, within a big pharma environment within another site. That is so
Mm,
valuable
mm.
to build your understanding of what life is like in a different cultural environment. So yeah, it's the richness I'm looking for when I'm selecting talent from big
Yep.
pharma.
We should talk about gender
Yeah,
and its role in leadership.
absolutely.
So it's noticeable that every CEO appointment, certainly within the CDMO space,
Yeah.
and also to an extent within big pharma as well, the majority of them that you see over the last 12 months or so has been male.
Yes.
And there's that general stat that 90% of CEOs within the pharma industry are men. How does this affect the leadership dynamic?
Well, yeah, I mean, if we look at and we've got several customers, we've worked really hard to create that richness of diversity in their team and diversity at all levels, right? Not just gender diversity, but cultural diversity.
Mhm.
One of the things that you instantly lose is innovation. I won't name the companies, but there's a couple of very large CDMO companies with a couple of CEOs who I think are doing exceptional work right now. One in the biologic space, a very large company who we've partnered with in the past, and the CEO is working really hard to create a very diverse business and focus on talent. And
Hmm.
and actually, what I'm seeing within that business is I'm seeing much more innovation than many other businesses out there right now. And this
That's
is not
interesting.
coincidental.
Hmm.
This has not happened by luck. he's intentionally built that, and then creating succession for particularly female leaders within his leadership team. But yeah, so I think there's some very good, some good things that are happening within the industry. But ultimately, you're right. The job at the top, the CEO role, in the vast majority, is still taken by a male leader right now. And I've done work in D&I and driven initiatives right across the globe for so many years now, and and done so many pieces of research about the why. So why is that? And it is a complicated answer, actually. But ultimately, it's opportunity and accessibility. That's the kind of the two things which you, as a leader of a business or as trying to get onto that C-suite, because of the environmental pressures that female leaders are having to tackle. The playing field is very often very not level, between their counterparts. So it's, you have to be intentional. I think we touched on this on our last time we spoke, but you have to be intentional about what you're trying to do, rather than saying the best person will get the job. Where's that succession planning? Where's that planning to make sure that that person does land into that CEO role? And again, that's where I think the CDMO industry has a lot of improvement. In fact, big pharma are getting there very slowly. It's like glacial pace everywhere, but ultimately you have to be intentional and say, okay, this individual, we've got several individuals who are going to land into this CEO role. Just one thing to add in terms of diversity on CEO roles. One thing I can share, and it's kind of anecdotal, or I took a very small sample size, if you like, but the innovators who are obviously feeding the customer base for CDMOs, there's some great female CEOs who are coming through there. I mean, I'm talking about 10, 15, 20 people in these businesses. But, I met a few of them in a bio, and they are amazing, either come from academia or spun out of a big pharma company. Some great leaders, and what I was thinking is, wouldn't it be great if we continue to grow their careers, they grow their business, and, weave it in, bring them into the CDMO eventually, and create some kind of pipeline for the organizations and also the industry as well.
That's really interesting. So they're mostly working in biotechs, would you say?
They are, yeah.
What sort of training programs would you recommend to pharma companies, whether that's around building a more positive, nurturing culture or addressing some of the other talent needs?
I've been in organizations whereby we've had very structured development programs at certain levels of the business. But what I've often found is those development programs are a very small percentage of the workforce, kind of 0.0% of the workforce. So you're only really getting access once you reach a certain level. One of the most interesting things that we installed in the past is frontline leadership training. In fact, and actually, I'll move on to talk about how we're trying to play in this space and influence the direction of travel. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is capture those leaders much earlier in their career, rather than waiting for they eventually get to a director or vice president level, and they eventually start accessing some of these development programs. It's way too late. I mean, seriously, 20 years into the career, and we're only just trying to train people at that stage. I'm really proud of some of our customers who are seizing this initiative right now and saying, hey, look, we can't wait. We know there's this talent precipice, which, we spoke about, during CDMO Live. And, that's going to continue to be a challenge. So I would say access to frontline leadership type of training, and there's many different products and offerings out there. But also, if you rewind the clock a little bit further, in terms of when you enter the CDMO industry, one of the things that we've identified is the making sure that they are culturally aware of what it's like to join a CDMO business. So you might come from academia, you might come from big pharma, but ultimately, what is life like within a CDMO environment? And we'll be soon releasing training that starts to plug this gap. Because I know, if I'm onboarding talent into a business, one of the key things is, how do I get that talent up to speed fast in this environment? And you'll soon see some fantastic products that we're going to be releasing, both to the employee and also hiring managers, that help that transition and start to put the skills in place to enable their long career within a CDMO environment.
Does that then shortcut them having to learn on the job, make their own mistakes for about a year before they finally get good at operating?
Exactly. That's right, Luke. I mean, when I was at Patheon, we had sites all around the world. You're reliant on the good nature of the people, the leaders, the supervisors locally. You're reliant on the competence and capability. And that's a big ask to put on the sites. So we're going to bring people in who haven't quite got the skill set. We're expecting everyone to be at the same level. So if we bring a customer to Australia or US, the competence level is going to be the same. Well, hang on, how are we going to kind of do that, right? So how are we going to make sure that happens consistently? So I think this product will absolutely accelerate that. We're kind of the what we call a door to floor, accelerating that journey as they onboard into a CDMO business.
Great. Finally, Neil, if you could summarize, what are the key takeaways for listeners who are looking to improve leadership skills or create a better leadership culture?
It's a really good question to ask right now, because we are in this state of flux. There is a lot of change, which change of it. But ultimately, I think we have probably many aspiring businesses out there, leaders who really want to do the right thing and develop themselves, develop their organizations. So I think it comes down to asking yourself why, right? So why are you looking to make these changes, and what's the driver that sits behind this? So asking those fundamental questions first, because the solution will be very different based on either your growth, your maturity, what you're trying to achieve. So, I think there is if you can put the talent plan in place based on those simple but effective questions, then you suddenly create a strong competitive advantage for you as either a big pharma business, innovator, CDMO, big pharma business. You're creating a strong competitive advantage, both from attraction, retention, but also, most importantly, winning more business as a CDMO. And this is what you cannot forget, that as you engage with procurement now in big pharma, they are very often looking, okay, show me your plans, show me how effective you are at both recruiting and also developing your people. So yeah, as a CEO, this should be absolutely number one on the list of objectives that you should be targeting right now.
Great, thank you. And you've been very careful throughout this, Neil, not to mention any names. But if I could just press you just to call out one leader who you think is doing great work and should be a good example to everyone else, who would that be?
Lars Pedersen from Fujifilm.
Why is that?
So Lars is set his stall out for Fuji, and they are trying to drive the right behaviors and creating the right talent platform in a business or an environment that is relatively low profit margins compared to their counterparts in big pharma. But that those thinner margins doesn't mean you can't do the right things. So investing in those talent initiatives, driving the right behaviors. I would say that they're probably the light should be shined on them in terms of what they're doing right now and what they're trying to do. Let's see if they get there or not.
Yep. Fantastic. Neil, fascinating as ever. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Luke. Speak to you soon.
To keep up to date with the latest in biopharma outsourcing, sign up to pharmasource.global. Thank you for listening.